when a child starts acting unnaturally and no one can explain what is happening. The film begins with an excavation project in Iraq, led by a priest named Father Marin, a man known not only for his faith, but also for his expertise as an archaeologist. During the excavation, he discovers an artifact that points to the existence of an ancient demon known as Pazuzu, a terrifying entity in Babylonian mythology. This discovery is not merely a coincidence, as in the past Marin had once confronted this very demon when it possessed a woman. The story then shifts to Washington, D.C., specifically Georgetown, where we are introduced to Chris MacNeil, a well-known actress who is busy with her career.
And action! Hasn't that been enough killing?
Perfectly plain,
She has recently moved into a new house to support her filming schedule while raising her daughter Reagan on her own as a single parent. Due to Chris's busy lifestyle, Reagan often spends time alone at home, although Chris has hired a nanny and house staff to keep her company so she would not feel lonely. One day, when Chris has a break from filming, she decides to spend time with Reagan by playing together in the basement of their house. It is there that Chris discovers a Ouija board, which turns out to belong to Reagan. Reagan explains that she found it in a closet in the basement and often uses it to play. She then tells her mother that she has an invisible friend she calls Captain Howdy, not realizing that this figure is actually the demon Pazuzu slowly approaching her. Beneath her cheerful appearance, Reagan is actually quite lonely, which makes her vulnerable to the presence of this entity. The demon takes advantage of her loneliness by getting close to her and pretending to be her friend.
Hey, where'd this come from?
Found it. Closet.
Really don't want me to play, huh?
Captain Howdy said no.
Captain Howdy, yeah.
One night, Chris wakes up to the sound of a ringing phone and is surprised to find Reagan sleeping in her room. When asked, Reagan says that her bed often moves on its own, making her too scared to sleep alone. However, Chris dismisses it as nothing more than a child's imagination and does not think much of it. The next day, Chris takes Reagan to the hospital to check her condition, but there, they begin to notice unusual changes in her behavior. Reagan suddenly starts acting strangely, singing for no reason and speaking harshly to the nurse examining her.
Perfectly still, breathe normally.
Dr. Klein later explains that Reagan may be experiencing a neurological disorder common in children her age, possibly triggered by emotional stress from loneliness. Although the explanation sounds reasonable, Chris still feels that something is not right, but she decides to take Reagan home anyway. That night, Chris hosts a small gathering at her house, but the relaxed atmosphere quickly turns awkward when Reagan once again behaves inappropriately in front of the guests. She speaks rudely and embarrasses everyone by wetting herself on the carpet, leaving Chris deeply embarrassed as she apologizes to her guests. After that, Chris takes Reagan to her room so she can rest. Inside the room, Reagan, confused and frightened, questions what is happening to her as she feels she has no control over her own actions. After calming her down until she falls asleep, Chris leaves the room, but not long after, the atmosphere turns tense again. As she is about to go downstairs, Chris hears a scream coming from Reagan's room, and in panic, she immediately runs back to see what is happening to her daughter. When Chris enters the room, she is completely shocked to see Reagan's bed violently shaking on its own without any logical explanation. The incident only deepens her concern, so the next day, she takes Reagan back to the hospital for further examination. However, this time Reagan's condition appears even more unstable, as she continues to resist, and once again speaks in a way that is far too harsh for a child her age.
I don't want it! You fucking bastard!
After the examination, the doctor explains to Chris that Reagan may be suffering from a neurological disorder that could trigger hallucinations, and he also suggests that the bed shaking the night before was most likely caused by muscle spasms. Chris immediately rejects this explanation, insisting that she was on the bed at the time and clearly felt how powerful the movement was, something she believes could not possibly be caused by ordinary spasms. Even so, the doctor remains firm in his medical reasoning and recommends that Reagan undergo a more thorough brain examination. During the procedure, Reagan appears to be in intense pain, which makes Chris even more distressed seeing her daughter in such a condition. However, once the brain scan results come out, no abnormalities are found, and medically Reagan is declared completely normal. With no signs of a serious condition, she is allowed to return home to rest. Unfortunately, instead of improving, Reagan's condition becomes even worse after they return. Feeling that the situation is getting out of control, Chris quickly calls Dr. Klein and asks him to come to the house. When he arrives, he is shocked to see Reagan having violent seizures in a very unusual way, and at one point, Reagan even cries for help while uttering disturbing threats. As the doctor tries to approach her, Reagan suddenly attacks him, forcing him to administer a sedative injection to calm her down. Despite witnessing everything firsthand, Dr. Klein still insists on conducting another brain examination, which causes Chris to lose her patience, as she feels the doctors continue to treat this as a normal medical issue, when, in her opinion, something far more unnatural is happening. After a long argument and seeing Reagan's condition continue to worsen, Chris eventually agrees to another round of tests, even though the results, once again, show no problems with Reagan's brain.
Dr. Tanny says the x-rays are negative. In other words, normal.
After that, Chris returns home to check on her daughter. As she enters the room, she notices the window wide open, with freezing air making the room feel unnaturally cold. This irritates Chris, as she assumes the caregiver has left Reagan alone in such conditions. Not long after, Sharon returns and explains that before leaving, she had asked Burke, Chris's assistant, to watch over Reagan. However, something feels off when Burke is nowhere to be found in the house. Shortly after, someone arrives with shocking news that Burke has died after falling down the stairs, his neck broken. The situation becomes even more terrifying when Reagan suddenly appears at the top of the stairs, moving in a disturbing, unnatural way that sends everyone into panic.
Hi, Jack, come on in.
Burke's dead. Broke his neck. He must have been drunk. He fell down from the top of the steps.
Realizing that there is no logical explanation for what is happening, Chris finally decides to seek help from a psychiatrist to understand what is truly going on with her daughter. During the session, the psychiatrist uses hypnosis to explore what is inside Reagan, including asking about the entity she calls Captain Howdy. However, Reagan appears frightened and claims she does not know anything. When the psychiatrist tries to push further and interact with the presence inside her, the situation turns dangerous as the entity reacts aggressively and attacks him.
Answer me now.
Meanwhile, the story shifts to a detective named William, who is investigating Burke's death. As part of his investigation, he meets Father Damien, a priest who also has a background in psychiatry, to help him understand the strange nature of the case. William explains that Burke's body was found in an unnatural state, with his head twisted 180 degrees, something that is difficult to explain as the result of a simple fall. This leads William to suspect that Burke may have been killed before being thrown down the stairs.
Burke Dennings, you read how he died. Turned completely around, facing backward.
Meanwhile, Reagan's condition continues to worsen to a truly alarming point, forcing the doctors to restrain her body, to prevent her from hurting herself or others. She is placed under strict supervision, yet despite all the medical efforts, nothing seems to work. Even after being examined by dozens of doctors, not a single one is able to determine the exact cause of her condition, until eventually Dr. Klein and the rest of the medical team begin to give up and admit that the case is beyond their understanding. After all medical methods fail to produce any results, Dr. Klein finally suggests something highly unusual, asking Chris to seek help from a priest to perform an exorcism. He begins to consider that what Reagan is experiencing may not be an ordinary illness, but rather the result of something unseen. He even implies that the lack of spiritual belief in Chris and Reagan's lives could have made them more vulnerable to such disturbances.
88 doctors, and all you can tell me with all of your bullshit is...
You ever heard of exorcism? Belief in the power of exorcism can make it disappear. Stylized ritual in which the...
You're telling me that I should take my daughter to a witch doctor?
Meanwhile, Detective William continues his investigation at the site of Burke's death and uncovers several suspicious clues. He finds a stone resembling an ancient artifact, similar to the one discovered by Marin earlier, which strengthens his suspicion that something unusual lies behind this case. He also discovers evidence suggesting that Burke had been inside Reagan's room before the incident, raising serious questions about what truly happened that night. Back at the house, Chris is confronted with another strange occurrence when she finds a crucifix mysteriously placed under Reagan's pillow, even though no one in the house admits to putting it there. Not long after, Detective William visits the house to ask further questions about Burke's death. He tries to determine whether Reagan might remember anything from that night, but Chris explains that Reagan had been heavily sedated, making it unlikely for her to recall anything. This only adds to William's confusion, although he still suspects that someone with extraordinary physical strength may have been involved, yet the case ultimately leads to no clear conclusion.
You're a very nice lady. Bye.
After William leaves, the atmosphere in the house once again turns tense when Chris hears disturbing noises coming from Reagan's room. When she enters, she sees objects moving and flying around the room, while Reagan's behavior becomes even more disturbing as she begins to harm herself. In that moment, the presence inside Reagan seems to speak directly to Chris, questioning whether she truly understands what her daughter has done, making the situation even more terrifying. With no other options left, Chris finally seeks out Father Damien and tells him everything that has happened to Reagan. She pleads with him to perform an exorcism, although he initially refuses due to the high risks involved and the need for official approval from the church. However, seeing how desperate Chris has become, Father Damien eventually agrees to help, on the condition that he must first gather sufficient evidence. He then visits Chris's house to witness Reagan's condition firsthand. Inside the room, he attempts to communicate with the entity within Reagan, and it quickly becomes clear to him that this is far beyond a normal disturbance. The entity is even able to reveal deeply personal information about Father Damien, including the recent death of his mother, something no one else should have known. This only strengthens his belief that he is dealing with something truly unnatural.
I'm a friend of your mother's. I'd like to help you. I'm Damien Karras.
And I'm the devil.
Where's Reagan?
In here with us. Your mother's in here with us, Karras.
If that's true, then you must know my mother's maiden name.
Before leaving, Father Damien asks Chris one important question, whether Reagan could possibly know about his mother's death, and Chris firmly denies it, explaining that they have only recently met. After gathering all the necessary evidence, Father Damien formally requests permission from the church to perform an exorcism. After careful consideration, the church grants approval, but with one important condition: Father Marin must take part in the ritual due to his past experience confronting the demon Pazuzu. Without hesitation, Father Marin accepts and prepares himself to face once again the entity he had once defeated. That night, Father Marin finally arrives at Chris's house to assist Father Damien, once again facing the demon Pazuzu he had defeated in the past. Without wasting any time, they immediately begin the exorcism ritual.
Our Father.
Cocksucker. Be silent.
Save your servant, who places her trust in thee, my God.
The Lord sustains my life.
The atmosphere inside the room grows increasingly tense as prayers are recited and holy water is sprinkled onto Reagan, while the entity within her continues to resist. The demon repeatedly tries to weaken Father Damien's faith by attacking him psychologically, even claiming that his mother is now in hell, which leaves him shaken and momentarily speechless.
To confront this cruel demon, from your hostile powers.
Have your ass.
In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, Damien! The power of Christ compels you! That compels you. It's the power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
The prolonged ritual gradually drains both priests of their energy, and at one point Father Merrin appears exhausted and briefly steps away to the bathroom to compose himself. It becomes clear that he is in pain as he takes medication, revealing that his physical condition is not as strong as it seems. Meanwhile, Father Damien returns to the room to check on Reagan, only to be confronted once again by the same manipulation as the entity takes the form of his mother, attempting to break his faith from within. Seeing that Father Damien is beginning to lose his composure, Father Merrin decides to continue the ritual alone and asks him to leave the room, fearing that his shaken state might jeopardize the process.
What in heaven? Hallowed be thy name.
However, not long after, Father Damien returns, sensing that something is wrong. As he enters, he is shocked to find Father Merrin lying lifeless on the bed, having suffered a heart attack. Overcome with anger and desperation, Father Damien makes a bold decision to confront the entity directly and forces it to leave Reagan's body. He demands that it enter him instead, a dangerous act that he believes is the only way to save her. The entity complies, transferring itself into Father Damien. Realizing that he will not be able to resist it for long, with the last of his consciousness, Father Damien sacrifices himself by throwing himself out of the window, ending everything and ensuring that the threat can no longer harm Reagan. After the horrifying ordeal, Reagan finally regains consciousness and slowly returns to normal. All of this is made possible by Father Damien's sacrifice.
Do you want to make a confession?
Realizing that the house holds too many painful memories, Chris decides to leave it behind with Reagan and start a new life in Europe, trying to move on from everything they have been through. The story comes to an end.